Hello everyone, and welcome to the Evil Within 1 config and tech video. Get my notes open here and my folder. So on the left here we've got the install folder for the Evil Within 1. You'll have the base folder, the Evil Within.exe, and you'll have a few other DLLs or so forth. I have those hidden just so they're not a distraction. This YouTube video folder I made for myself so that I could have a few other things open here while we do this video. So we'll get into these other things a little later. So just don't worry about that folder. So this is the install folder and then the notes here. So in this video we'll be setting up Evil Within 1, general settings and advanced where needed. This will cover the base game and the 3 DLCs that were released. Evil Within 1 is what I would call an in-depth game, so I have a decent amount of information to go over with you here. The game does have some technical and gameplay wise issues. There's a really good game here though, if you can get past some of the jank. This will hopefully put the game in the best playable state it can be. Any links that are covered will be in the description of the video. So the first thing we'll talk about here, get down to the ends, the version differences. This is right from the PCGamingWiki for the Evil Within 1. The Microsoft Store version is significantly different concerning gameplay, improved performance, and bug fixes. It features a first-person mode with a field of view option, infinite ammo mode, low to medium options for the camera bob when your character moves, and increased stamina, 5 seconds by default instead of 3. The GOG or the Good Old Games version and the Microsoft Store version contain the Fighting Chance Pack DLC that was previously exclusive to pre-orders. This included an exclusive weapon, the double-barrel shotgun, special ammo, incendiary agony bolts, and poison agony bolts. It also gives you a medical kit and 5,000 green gel in Chapter 3. Sounds like some good additions have been included. Always a slap in the face to people who pre-order when they repackage releases to include exclusive content. I will be playing and showing you how to adjust the Steam version because that's what I have. Truth be told, I originally played this game on the PS3, the PlayStation 3, then bought it on Steam for PC. Pretty much right after I bought it on Steam, I found out about the additions in the GOG.com and Microsoft Store version. Since Microsoft owns Tango Gameworks, I'm not surprised they would release a patch version for their store. I'm not sure why Steam doesn't have the unified version that everyone else has, as these additions are selling points. So I've already bought this game twice as it is, and I'm not buying it again for additions that the Steam version should have too. If it was a proper remaster or remake of the Evil Within 1, that's a different story. If you want my opinion on which version to get, I would say buy the GOG.com version of the main game and the 3 DLCs. The improved performance and bug fixes is going to be the best part of the purchase. Don't get this confused with it being a remaster. It's just a patched version. None of the PC versions of this game are going to run perfectly. Depending on your version of the Evil Within 1, I would advise you to reference the PCGamingWiki page for the game. Your version may require variations on fixes or completely different methods. Next thing we'll talk about here is the DirectX API. PCGamewiki states that the game is running under DirectX 11, which it is, but also says the game is internally using OpenGL. I think I've seen this before in other games, but I don't think it's very common. This may explain why the game has the jank that it does. It's an OpenGL game tweaked to work under DirectX 11. It would have been preferable if it was DirectX 9 or 10 converted to 11. Okay, so the next section here is going to be FPS frame rate. This is going to be a little lengthy here. So I want to talk about the game's FPS and fixes for choppy camera movement. Please be aware that some of these things will be dependent on a few factors, such as using a mouse and keyboard to play, using NVIDIA or AMD GPU, and the version of the game you are playing. If you are using a gamepad to play this game, then it may be fine. I've never played this game with a gamepad, so I have no idea. For me, when I play first-person shooters or third-person shooters, if I need to use free aiming to shoot and kill stuff, I prefer to use a mouse and keyboard, so I can aim better with the mouse. A gamepad is going to give you better or tighter movement controls. If you are someone who can aim well with a gamepad, I applaud you. This game was designed around 30 FPS for consoles and made to run at 60 FPS for PC. At 30 FPS, the game will technically play better, but be more choppy. Above 60 FPS, you're likely to have animation issues and have enemies move faster. Attacks can also do variable damage to you and result in one-hit kills. Even at 60 FPS in this game, weirdness can happen. Again, it was designed around 30 FPS. On PC, you want to aim for 60 FPS or higher for a smooth experience. If you are speedrunning The Evil Within 1 on PC, you may want to consider 30 FPS. You can set the frame rate to either 30 FPS or 60 FPS with VSync in-game. By using commands, you can unlock the frame rate entirely. Those commands being +R_ swap interval -2. This equals 30 FPS, no VSync. +R_ swap interval -1. This equals 60 FPS with VSync. And then you can also do +R_ swap internal 0. And this equals an unlocked FPS with no VSync. Typically in a game like this, you want to set your FPS to 60 or force it through your GPU settings, your graphics processor unit, so you don't push more frames out of your GPU than you need based on the refresh rate of your monitor or TV. Turn VSync on either in the game or force it through your GPU settings, so you can avoid screen tearing in your graphics when playing. Fix my little typo. I'm going to give you two methods here. If the first method doesn't work, then try the other. Okay. Just trying to get my text aligned here. Okay, so method 1. In Steam, right-click on the Evil Within 1 game and go to Properties. In the launch box, type the following command: +R_ swap interval -1. The launch command should make sure the frame rate or the frame lock setting in the game is set to 60 FPS with VSync. You still need to verify this to be true, so make sure you check. In the first area of the game, when you have control of your character, move your mouse around and look at your character. The camera should move smoothly around him. If the environment or background appears to move with a slight stutter and not smoothly, then you're having the same issue I did, and we need to move on to the second method. It's either an issue with the in-game VSync/frame limiting methods, or it's a problem with the mouse movement of the camera being tied to the frame rate. Mouse control is always an afterthought for games ported to PC. So in Steam, right-click Evil Within 1 game, go to the properties, in the launch box, type the following command: +R_ swap interval 0. Since we are now unlocking the frame rate and losing the VSync setting too, we need to force these on through our GPU settings. I'm using an NVIDIA GPU, so let me show you the settings to adjust. So let me actually back up here because I want to bring up the launch command. So this is the launch window when you right-click on Evil Within in Steam and click Properties. This is what pops up. And here's the launch box I'm talking about down here with the command. I'll cover these other launch commands further in the video, so don't worry about them right now. Just focus on this one. But this is what you would type in right here, obviously without any of this. +R_ swap interval. And you're either going to be doing it with the -1 to get 60 FPS with VSync. Try that out. If everything's cool, then you're done. And if you still think it has stutter, then you're going to want to use this method, which is what I ended up using. So as stated, since we're unlocking the frame rate using this method, we're also losing the VSync. And we need to put this on in our graphics card. So this is my NVIDIA control panel here. Let me read down the steps here. So you open your NVIDIA control panel, you pick 3D settings over here under 3D settings, manage 3D settings, and then you click the Program Settings tab. You need to add or search for your Evil Within 1.exe. So you'll click Add here, and you'll look for it in a list. Okay, once you have added the Evil Within profile to NVIDIA, put the max frame rate, so that is this one here, max frame rate. Set that to 60 FPS. So this is the first method here. Yeah. First, set it to, I know mine says 61. I'll get to that. But first, try it with 60. So that your FPS isn't like 300 FPS in the game. And then put the vertical sync setting to on so you can avoid screen tearing. You'll scroll further down here. We'll discuss this here in a bit too. Don't worry about that at the moment. Here's the VSync setting. So you're going to want to do not 61, 60. Put max frame rate to 60, and then put your VSync to on. The launch command should make sure the frame lock setting in the game is set to unlock FPS with no VSync. This right here. You still need to verify this to be true, so make sure you check in the game. This time when you check, it will say 30 FPS in the game, but it is actually unlocked. In the first area of the game, when you have control of your character, move your mouse around and look at your character. The camera should move smoothly around him. The environment or background should be moving a lot more smoothly now too. If the first method of using 60 FPS in the game with VSync wasn't good enough. It should be improved now by using the unlocked frame rate method and then forcing these settings on. Okay, if you feel method 2 is helping but still have some slight lag in the camera movement, change the setting you adjusted for max frame rate 60 FPS in NVIDIA to max frame rate 61 FPS in NVIDIA. I am using the 61 FPS value for good measure, as I was still getting slight lag with the 60 FPS value set. When we play, I'll point out some areas where you can test early on in the game to just see if the movement is fluid or not. Okay, and I'll get to the quality thing here that you see in black in a little bit. Do note that in other games you may need to lock the FPS to 59 to accomplish the same thing we're doing here. This will come up again in the future future config and tech videos for other games. To be honest, this game isn't going to run flawlessly no matter what you do, but hopefully a combination of what we went over will help you. Are we done talking about FPS now? I sure hope we are. Okay, let's move on to the next thing here. So the next thing we're going to go over is zoomed in resolution. If you start the game, or you set the resolution in the game correctly, you may see that the game is now zoomed in to the upper left quadrant of the screen. This happened for me, and I've seen this happen in dozens and dozens of older games on PC. The fix is simple and generally works 90% of the time when you need to use it. This is a good tweak to remember for future PC games you play. So I'll show you a little how-to segment here. So go to the install folder path for Evil Within 1. Steam Apps, Common, the Evil Within 1, which is where we are. Right-click on your Evil Within 1 exe, and then click Properties. This will pop up. Select the Compatibility tab at the top. Click the Change High DPI Settings button at the bottom, so right here. Then go to the bottom section called High DPI Scaling Override, right here. Check the box for Override High DPI Scaling Behavior. Make sure the drop-down menu is on Application. So make sure this is checked. And you'll have, generally, you won't always have these three choices, I don't believe. Some EXEs don't give you the enhanced option or something. But you want to pick Application. If Application doesn't work, you can then try System, but generally Application is the one you want to use. Click OK, and then click Apply, and then click OK. And that should fix it. And it's kind of like if you took the screen, like the normal presentation of the screen, and you split it in 4 quadrants, and you were just left with like the upper left quadrant of the picture. That's kind of what your whole image on your screen turns into. And it's generally just this setting needs to be applied and it will address it. Okay, next thing we'll talk about here is texture cache. A little too far. Okay. Still went too far. So the game doesn't properly create a folder in Windows to store the game's texture cache files, at least on the Steam version. This could result in the game stuttering or freezing during gameplay, because the game has to cache them each time you play. This can be resolved by creating this folder manually. So first run the Evil Within 1 at least once, so that it can try to generate what it can as far as folders go. I'll do another little how-to segment here. You need to go to the following folder path to verify. C users, and then this part here will be whatever your username is for your computer. App data, local, and then Tango GameWorks. And that's essentially going to open this folder up for you. Tango GameWorks. If you've never played The Evil Within 2, then you're definitely not going to have this, but I already have this set up for that game as well. If your game has already created the folder, then this is what you should see. It may not say NG at the end, but it might. But if it doesn't, this is what you need to make. So in this folder, Tango GameWorks, create a folder called The Evil Within _NG, just like it looks. I'm not sure what the NG means, maybe new game or something. Now the game will create the texture cache correctly and store the files, hopefully making the game run smoother after this adjustment. If you go in here, you can see it creates a 1 gigabyte file cache 000.bin and then 128 kilobyte file cache header.bin. So it's only a gig, but so, and same thing for Evil Within 2. You need to do the same thing for that game. Yeah, keep in mind when you're done playing. Well, let me get onto that. Let me close this off. Okay. Keep in mind when you're done playing, and even if you uninstall Evil Within 1, those cache files remain where they are, and they can take up a good chunk of data storage. Keep the folder so if you play the game again, it will still have a place to cache the textures. Just make sure you delete the files that are inside the Evil Within _ng folder. Then on a side note, this applies to the Evil Within 2 as well. So do the same procedure, naming the folder differently, of course, and it will make the Evil Within 2 run smoother as well. So the next thing we'll talk about here is skip intro videos. A handful of these play every time you run the game, and they are unskippable. So you'll see these play in my gameplay part 01 video. Then I will be using this command myself to skip them. So in Steam, you right-click the Evil Within 1 game and go to Properties, and in the launch box, you type the following command right here. So the same place we were in before, where we put in to unlock the frame rate. This is the skip intros command, +com _ skip intro video 1. And you just need to make sure that on each one of these commands that you separate it by a space. There has to be a space. You have to have these underscores. Everything's case sensitive, you know, so it has to be just like that or it won't work. It doesn't matter the order. You could put the +com skip intro video +1, or just 1, not +1. But you could put this in front and then have this be the second one, and that's fine. So the order doesn't matter, just how they're written and how things are spaced. But I always like to show the intro videos at least once, so you'll see them in the first gameplay video, and then that's it. Okay. Anisotropic filtering in GPU settings. The in-game anisotropic filtering has values of 1x to 4x. It is set to 4x by default and can't go higher than that. Don't force this on in your GPU settings. If you do, you're likely to see texture shimmering. So just weird problems with the graphics. So show a how-to segment. I will be making sure the game is set at 4x by using a launch command. So same thing again. Open your launch window or your properties window in Steam for the Evil Within 1 in the launch box. And you want to type +VT _ max aniso or anisotropic ANISO 4. And this will make sure the game is using 4 times. Which, as stated, it should be by default, but this will just, make sure. But what I'm implying here is don't go into your graphics card and bump it up to like 16x, because you'll just cause texture shimmering. Okay? White lines in graphics. This may only apply to NVIDIA users. I have an NVIDIA GPU, and this happens for me. You can see these white lines on the long coat your character is wearing at the beginning of the game. They are faint, but they are there, and this can easily be fixed in the NVIDIA GPU settings. These white lines could appear in other places in the game, but I've always made this adjustment. So open your NVIDIA control panel, right here. Pick 3D settings, manage 3D settings, Programs tab setting. Same thing again, you need to add, search, or pick your Evil Within 1.exe. Once you've added the Evil Within 1 profile to NVIDIA, make sure the setting texture filtering is set to quality. So right here. You'll have all these different options here, so just make sure it's on quality. If it is set to high quality, you will see the white lines in the game. All right. For me, I've actually got my global settings of my NVIDIA card already set to quality, but I just went ahead and applied it to the game directly because it's not going to hurt anything to do so. That should cover everything in here. You're either going to be using 60 or 61 for the max frame rate limit, quality for the texture filtering quality, and then vertical sync on. That should be pretty much it. Blurry graphics in Chapter 5. There are 3 types of anti-aliasing methods you can use in The Evil Within 1. FXAA, MLAA, and SMAA. There's a certain room in Chapter 5 that turns into a blurry mess if you aren't using FXAA option. FXAA on its own uses overall image blurring as part of its technique to soften edges. It also tends to make written text, such as subtitles, more blurry as well. So if a game is already using a terrible looking font, I'm not saying that The Evil Within 1 is, the FXAA will make it look worse. These are all reasons I try and avoid using FXAA in any game unless I'm forced to. I will be using SMAA in my playthrough, as it's the best option of these 3 methods. So when we get to this area, you're going to hear me say, oh yeah, here is that blurry ass room. I'll put it on FXAA until we get done in the room, and then hopefully remember to switch it back to SMAA. Okay. Told you there's a lot to go over here. Graphics, color tone, and brightness. So we'll start with color tone. This game's color palette can vary depending on the area of the game. While color is present, it is used sparingly. I think this was a game design choice for the way the colors are handled. The Evil Within looks very similar in certain ways to the original Resident Evil 4. Some areas have a lot of green tones, while other areas almost feel black and white. When you have areas that are, then you have areas that are bright and colorful. The color tones remind me of old slasher and Dracula films. Brightness. The Evil Within is a dark game, which is also by design. It's a horror game after all. However, this game is pretty damn dark on the default of 50% brightness. Everyone's settings are going to be slightly different, as are everyone's eyes. I have my TV brightness at 50% and the backlight at 25% as I play in the dark. In the game, I set the brightness to 50%, 60%, and 75% and compared. 50% was too dark, and 75% started to look too washed out in the bright areas of the game. So I settled on 60%, and I may bump it up to 65% if I feel I need to. Just consider if you adjust your brightness to make the dark areas too visible, when you are in well-lit areas the game will be too bright and washed out looking. Not to mention the game's crazy use of the bloom effect will be even brighter. I need to take a quick sip of a drink. One moment. Otherwise, I'll lose my voice. Okay. Letterboxed cutscenes. When cutscenes play in The Evil Within, they will be in letterbox mode. A black bar on the top and the bottom of the screen, like in the movie theaters before the rise of high definition. This was a game design choice by the developer Shinji Mikami. When the game came out originally, the entire game was letterboxed. This included the gameplay too. Let me fix this. This included the gameplay too. There was no way to disable this either in the game. People playing the game were not happy about this, as they wanted to see all the graphics fill their screens. The game was eventually patched with an option to turn this off for gameplay. However, the cutscenes are still left in letterbox mode. You have to take what you can get sometimes, I guess. Okay, the next thing we'll cover here is console commands. You can access a developer console command line where you can use some cheats and adjust some settings. Using these will not keep you from getting achievements in the game. Keep in mind that some commands may need to be typed in again when certain transitions happen in the game, such as loading a new area or chapter. In Steam, right-click the Evil Within 1 game and go to Properties. In the launch box, type the following command: +com_allow console 1. Okay, let's look at that. Okay, so this will be the last launch command we put in. All right, so we have four separate commands here, all separated by, an individual space between each one. When you play the game now, the insert key on your keyboard will open the console, allowing you to type in commands. Okay, I just showed you that. To see various commands you can use, go to the PCGamingWiki for the Evil Within 1. Press Ctrl F on your keyboard and type notable console commands and press enter. You will see a little link. It should take you to the page area and highlight it for you. You will see a little link that says expand. Click that and it will show you a list of commands that you can type into the console. So we'll go over some commands explanation here. Okay, this is to do with the lantern light. You have a lantern in this game for your light source, like an old school lantern. I've always hated the level of the bloom effect on the environment and the lantern you carry. It's right there on your hip, visible nearly all the time, and it's blinding. This spills over into the environment as well with light sources. The effect is cranked up way too high with no means to adjust it. Using the console command, without quotes, r_skip glare _1 does remedy this somewhat. The negative effect is it disables all post-processing effects, and it also makes the color temperature of the graphics darker. In turn, this makes the overall game appear darker than it should be. I won't be using this command because of all the negatives, but it's there. It would be nice if a proper mod existed that would just tone down the bloom effect on the lantern or in general. Okay, now I'll go over the next thing here. Mouse smoothing or acceleration. The game does have a console command to turn this off, as it is on by default. Sometimes this setting in games can make the mouse movement worse, especially in FPS shooters where you need to aim precisely. Mouse smoothing can be good for a point-and-click game, though. I tried it on and off and it didn't seem to make any difference. So I would just say, in this case, leave it alone, but the console command is m_smooth 0. That will turn it off, and then 1 will turn it back on. So you'll have to press insert key on your keyboard in the game once you've enabled the console and the launch command, of course, and then you type m_smooth 0. For reference, I have my Razer mouse set to a custom 550 DPI, and my in-game mouse sensitivity is set to 14 in the game options. I had to set my in-game mouse sensitivity to at least 14, otherwise the mouse cursor would not move smoothly in the menus. So just kind of a weird effect of anything, below 14 is just not going to give you any mouse control really in menus. So, okay. The next thing we'll cover here is Upscaled Cutscenes mod. And this is from the Nexus mods. This link here will be in the description of the video. I will be using one mod for this game to upscale the cutscenes and the in-game videos. The cutscenes are upscaled to 14K quality, and the in-game videos are scaled to 200% from their original size. It's worth mentioning that this applies to the base game and the 3 DLCs. One mod for everything, which is very nice of the modder. Since this is a simple mod to use, there is no need to dedicate a separate modding video to it. The mod is from nexusmods.com, and I will provide the link in the description of this video. The only other mods for the Evil Within 1 are mostly just reshade presets and save files. Backing up your original files is recommended. Inside the Bink folder, I made a folder called Original Videos, and I put them all in there. Then I just dragged the mod files into the Bink folder. Done. So if you go in here under Base, have all this stuff in here, and you go into Bink. So I made this folder, and this is all of the original, the DLCs. Pretty sure this is assignment Kidman, because you play as Kidman. Kidman 2 is a consequence, and Box 2 is referencing playing as the Keeper and the Executioner. But yeah, all these BK2 files are all the cutscenes, and then the DLCs have their separate ones. And this is all the base game. So put your original ones in there, and we can see what this equates to. 906 megs, not a big deal. And then all the ones you see that are in here are the mod. So then you can revert to your originals if you would like. And I think I did want to show, here's the it's a .7z file, like a zip, a .zip or .rar. So this is what it looks like when you get it. There's a README here. I'm not going to read this to you. I'll let you read that yourself, which I do recommend you do. This quick SFV is talked about in the README, and it's a way the modder has included a way to test the files that you downloaded to make sure that they are uncorrupted, that they get unpacked properly and all that. I personally didn't do it myself to check them, and I haven't had any problems. But it's really nice, and shows care for the mod that the modder made to include something like that, a testing tool, so that you, the user, can verify that you've got everything correctly. And then, of course, the Evil Within folder is what you're going to be dragging and dropping to replace the files. Okay, so that covers the one single mod. So now we will go over the in-game settings. Usually, well, not usually, but in earlier playthroughs, I used to break down in written form, like kind of all the options of the game, graphically, audibly, and controls. And then I would also go in the game and show them to you, but I figured that was a little over redundant, overkill. So I've kind of stopped doing that. Now I just like to visually go into the game and show them to you, and then discuss them at the time I'm showing them to you. So now we'll go over the in-game settings, where I'll show and talk about what I'm using. This will only cover the base game settings, as the DLCs will use these same settings as well. You may want to adjust the keybinds, though, because between the DLCs and the base game, they have slightly different controls or actions. So I'm going to do a quick edit cut here in this video, and then we'll be in the game menu. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the in-game portion of the Config and Tech video for The Evil Within 1. We're in the options menu here where we're going to go over the general settings, the controls, the graphics, and the audio settings. So we'll first start with general. So your first option, by the way, you can use the arrow keys, the WASD keys to move through the sub settings, and use the tab key to go through the main categories at the top. Enter to apply, of course. So the first option you have is language, and you can pick your different languages here. I'm using English, same for voices. You have the option for French voices, Italian, German, Spanish, so pretty cool. I'm surprised there's no Japanese voices here, but there isn't. Graphic content, it tells you here, change the display language, change the audio language. Graphic content, display of extremely graphic content in some situations can be restricted, enabled or disabled. I really don't know what this does or doesn't do. I've always just left the graphic content enabled. Subtitles, turn them on or off. They're on, show. I like to use them for myself and for you guys, the viewer, because, you know, sometimes things get said by certain characters and it's hard to tell what they're saying. Life gauge / equip icon. Toggle the display of this. Auto, always, or disabled. I'm just going to leave it on auto. Partner life gauge. Show, hide. Toggle the display of that when you have like a partner with you. Tutorials, whether you want those on or off. Enemy alertness icon. So you have two options here, one for casual and one survival. And you can dictate whether that's shown or hidden, just for those two difficulties. When you play on Nightmare and Akumu, you don't get these enemy alert icons anymore. Interaction icons, whether you want that on or off, and then the target reticle for when aiming your gun. When you have a gun equipped, it's like always equipped on the screen, or always visible on the screen, even if you aren't aiming. It's kind of annoying, but it's the way it is in some games. I want to say in The Evil Within 2 they fixed that, but it's not a big deal. But in most cases, you're going to want a target reticle, but you do have a lot of different ways here to, besides the difficulty you pick to play the game in, you can make it even harder or easier on yourself, depending on how you adjust these settings. So, really cool. Okay, the next section is controls. We have keyboard bindings, so I'll just let you glance at mine. They don't really matter what mine are. You can briefly see what the actions are in the game here. We'll cover those in greater detail when we start playing the game. But I'm playing with keyboard and mouse, so. But what I pick here really doesn't matter. You can pick what you want, what you're comfortable with. And then there's button assignment. So this is for the gamepad, which I won't be using. But you can see the key bindings here. I'll let this sit for a minute because I know most of you will probably play or want to play this game with the gamepad. So you got type A, type B. It just kind of flip-flops what the L and R buttons do there. And then you have type C, and that messes with the right stick, some other things. There's type D. So there's A through D. So A would be like the default standard. But you got some different options here you can play with if you want to rock a gamepad. Toggle sneak. Whether you want to toggle or hold the button to do it. When you sneak in this game, you crouch basically. And then camera inversion. You know, whether you want up to be down or down to be up when you move the mouse or your thumbstick. Then camera X, camera y-axis, this sensitivity portrays or relates to the gamepad. So I just put these on 0. Just kind of like, I tend to kind of turn gamepad options off when I know I'm using a keyboard and mouse, just in case it won't, it might, you know, have the tendency to interfere with something. It's like vibration, you know, that's for gamepad. I've disabled it. But if I was using a gamepad, of course, I would turn it on. Auto aim disabled or enabled. I would assume auto aiming is automatically disabled when you're playing with mouse, because usually it is. It's probably grayed out, this setting. If you look at the controls and auto aim when you're playing the game, this setting is probably not adjustable, and it's probably grayed out because it probably doesn't apply if you're using a mouse. But if you're playing with gamepad, you've probably got the option to enable or disable, because this is really a gamepad setting, not a mouse setting. Mouse sensitivity, and here's where I put it on 14 as a bare minimum for using the mouse, because for me, anything lower made my mouse move very slow. Like this, in this menu here, it would not be moving this fluidly. So, okay, that covers all the control options for the most part. We'll get into graphics. So brightness, you get to pick this option as well when you start a new game, so it doesn't technically matter what it's set at here. Other than this, whatever you set it at, that becomes the default, but you have to pick the brightness again. You just have to kind of press enter when you pick a difficulty. So please adjust the brightness so that the mark in the center is barely visible. So depending on your screen's brightness and everything, also you're watching this on YouTube, so YouTube's compression and all that, this may be more visible or less visible to you. But there's essentially 3 icons of a lantern, and when they show these kind, they usually want the one on the far right to be clearly visible, the one in the middle to be barely visible, and the one on the left to be basically black. So 50% is the default. I've already discussed that I bumped this up to 60 just as a middle point between the default and increasing it further, just to make things a little more bright, just because this game is dark by default. Display area adjustment. This is where you just pick, based on these arrows on the left and right, the width of the screen. You should want this at 100, and you shouldn't have to adjust it. Screen grain adjustment. Adjust the graininess of the screen. This is the film grain effect that's used in the game, and I would highly, highly suggest you turn this down to 0. I don't even know what the default is, maybe 50, possibly, but I would turn it off. I think the cutscenes might have it baked in, meaning it's not going to affect that, but you don't want to be looking at film grain in the gameplay through the whole game, unless you really want to go for that look. If you do, that's totally cool, but I don't like film grain. So I have that set to 0. Hardware settings. So this is the meat and potatoes, I call it, settings of these games. So you have full screen. I have that enabled, of course. Generally, I always want to run a game full screened. If you have to Alt-Tab, or if you have to run 10 other programs when you're playing a game, then you might want to run it in windowed. But I always try to go full screen, just because, you know, the saying goes, you know, that you're going to get the most frame rate generally by running games and applications by full screen. Letterbox. So this is where you can adjust the letterbox setting, which wasn't in the game originally and was patched in later. I don't know what the default is. It's probably enabled by default. As mentioned, this has no effect on the cutscenes. It only affects the gameplay. So if you want black bars on the top and the bottom, like as you can see here, obviously there's words written up here, so this doesn't really count, but the graphics you know, start here and the graphics end here, and you got a black bar on the bottom and the top. This is what enabling letterbox would do. If you want that look to match the cutscenes that are forced letterbox, that's fine, enable it. But if you want the graphics to appear full screen vertically, then disable it. Resolution 1920 by 1080. I'm still using a 1080p television. I haven't got a 4K television yet. Frame lock. This has already been discussed previously in the FPS section of the Config and Tech video. And as mentioned, this is not actually on 30 FPS. This is on an unlocked frame rate. You can see my readings up here. Forced at 61 through my NVIDIA card. That's just what it says when you use the command in the launch command for Steam to unlock the frame rate. Anti-aliasing, and this is where you can pick SMAA, disabled, FXAA, MLAA, or SMAA. And we've already talked about that, the reason why I'm using that. Shadow quality, high is the highest setting. You got low, medium, and high. Motion blur, this actually should be off. I think it gets turned back on accidentally by the game. That means it's probably been on for a while, because I'm recording this after I have recorded a lot of videos, so it's probably gotten turned back on at some point. I just haven't realized it. But I would suggest that you turn motion blur off. It just makes graphics look worse, in my opinion. SSAO, I would enable this. This essentially applies to shadows that are represented by like physical objects. So like if you had a flower in a flower pot sitting on the ground in a lit scene and it was casting a shadow, the SSAO will dictate how well that flower pot shadow looks. Reflections, obviously reflections, and that covers all of these hardware settings. Yeah, that pisses me off. You gotta watch that motion blur setting, because it does just get turned back on by itself, even when you've turned it off in here. I've probably recorded 15 videos with it on and haven't realized it, but that's going to affect my videos, you know. Motion blur is going to make the motion in the game look worse, and you may notice it when you watch the gameplay videos, because there's nothing I can do to fix it now. Okay. Yeah, fix those. By the way, when you're in hardware settings, if you've unlocked the frame rate, blah, 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 if you go in here and change it to anything else and apply it, then it's going to mess all that up. You'll have to shut your game down, restart it, and let the launch command do its thing again. So just don't change the frame lock setting unless you intend to. Okay, the last category is audio, and we have 4 settings. Master volume, which is everything, and then further broken down into music, voices, sound effect, and cinematic. So basically the music or ambience of the game, dialogue spoken, and then sound effects like shooting your weapon or enemy noises, and sound dictated to cutscenes. So just put everything to 100. That's what I'm using, and that should be pretty good here. Just briefly scroll down the general settings here again. The controls. Like I said, the mouse sensitivity doesn't really matter if you're not going to be using a mouse, but if you are, then it does. Just letting you run through these again. Stupid motion blur. There's the audio once more. Okay guys, so in the next video, we will be getting into the gameplay directly. Thank you very much for watching and listening. I really appreciate it. Bye.